Hi, ladies. Faye and the team, thank you for having me tonight. Being that it's a special Mother's Day theme, I'm dedicating this to my mother tonight. In my line of work, it's really important to ask powerful questions. And one of the things I've learned is that when we go through life asking disempowered questions, we usually get the disempowered answers. And so my story today is about a really important question. So it had been a really long day of hearing condolences and shaking hands and wiping tears. We all sat at the kitchen table in her kitchen, but she wasn't there. My mother hadn't been there in months. She had been lying in bed, dying of cancer, and now she was gone. As we sat, dressed in black, passing dishes and plates around the table, I found myself getting up and wandering down the hall back to where I had last seen her alive. I curled up on the bed as if I was beside her. I pulled her neatly folded shawl to my face. It still smelled like her. In that moment, I became aware of a sound, a dreadful, horrible, guttural sound. I had never heard such a horrible sound in my whole life. Where was this coming from? As I drew in my next breath, I realized that sound was coming from me. My sisters rushed into the room. They sat down and rubbed my back. And in that moment, a sentence escaped my lips. A question was birthed, one that had been and would define my life from that moment on. Who's gonna love me now? Let's flash back to 9th grade. I was that kid. You mentioned nerdy. I was that kid. I spent most of my time in the guidance counselor's office trying to figure out what I was going to be when I grew up. I was hell-bent on being a success. I wanted to be a somebody. I wanted to travel the world and be the CEO of my own company. I was determined. A short time later, and not that long ago, or not that long after, rather, I discovered boys. My ambition turned to getting attention from boys and obsessing about relationships. You see, I have been obsessed, rather, with significance my entire life. I had been defined by the need to feel important, to feel loved, and to feel enough. I didn't realize it, but it's what drove me. At 21, I found myself settled into a career I hated and a job that was going nowhere. When I came home and I announced to my parents that I was going off to work on a cruise ship, I may as well have announced that I was going off to join the circus, given the reaction that my father had. My mother, on the other hand, gave me her most important and memorable piece of advice. She pulled me aside and she said, "I'll miss you, but I want you to go. Go and do the things that I didn't get a chance to do." Imagine that. At 21, my 3 older sisters were already either married or engaged. And here I was getting permission from my traditional Italian mother to go and do the things that she could not do. So I went. But by age 33, I had somehow gotten amnesia. I woke up and sure, I had a thriving alternative medicine practice. I had a big house in the burbs. We had luxury cars in the driveways, a cottage up north with a boat on the dock, and I had a ring on my finger. I checked all the boxes. I wasn't a failure, not by anyone's measure, except my own. I failed myself. I settled. I did not think of my mother's advice. I did not heed her advice to go do the things that she couldn't do. I settled for the guy that looked good on paper. I settled for the life that you're supposed to have, or at least the one all my friends were having. I had settled too long living without passion or purpose. The truth is, I had been settling my entire life just to get love. A year after my mother died, I had a horrible realization. Not only was I not going to do the things that she couldn't do, but I realized I was repeating her unfulfilled life. I feared that if I didn't make some radical changes, that I would die just like she did. But let's face it, when you decide to make changes, they're usually awkward before they're elegant. I ricocheted for a few more years, from career burnout to personal tragedy to financial despair and another broken relationship. Eventually, the only thing left to do was to change my story. So I made a decision. I decided to set off on a journey. I left the known and all of its comfort behind. I did the unconventional thing, the thing you're not supposed to do. I closed down my business, I packed up my condo, I put everything in storage, and I moved to Mexico. And after a few years in Mexico, I had the opportunity to move to Australia, and that's where life took me. And after that, a job offer came, and I moved to California, where I spent another few years. And the thing that I'm most proud of is that I was writing the script. I wrote the story. I wasn't living based on what someone else wanted for me. I was writing it by myself. Many passport stamps later, I realized that until I felt like enough from within, I would continue to search for love and acceptance and approval outside of myself, and I would keep settling for breadcrumbs at every turn. On a beautiful day, on a gorgeous beach in Australia, I finally had what I was looking for. In that moment, I felt whole. I felt complete. I felt content in here. There was no one beside me to give it. No money or accolades to confirm it. Just me. I had found the answer. It had come quietly in stillness. The answer to who's gonna love me now was me. And that's all I needed. So ladies, I want to leave you with one little piece tonight, and that is a question to ask yourselves. What is the one question that has been defining your life? What is the one question that has been working to unconsciously have you choose? And when you know what that is, what's the one tiny step that you can take to do something different? Thank you.